3 police boats showed up at my dock one gray morning, lights off like a bad dream, and they told me I didn't own the water I'd paid my life savings for. That's the shortest version, the one people want for a headline, but it doesn't explain how quiet things were the night I signed the papers, how small victories smell like sawdust and coffee, or how a neat little community association turned into a machine that ate neighbors for breakfast. My name is Eli Turner. I grew up around equipment. My dad built barns. My uncle fixed tractors, so when I bought a rundown property on Crane Hollow Lake, I thought I was buying work and peace. A little land, a little dock, room enough for a fire pit and a dog. That's all I wanted. The first year was magic. Mornings with mist on the water, evenings when the loons called, and the sky looked big enough to hold every worry. Then Margot Voss moved into the HOA board, and everything shifted. Margot was the kind of person who smiles like a light switch and flips it when you blink. Polished shoes, polished words. She ran Pinebridge Homeowners Association like a private country club with bylaws stapled to her desk. At first it was small things, a note about an unapproved pier tacked to my mailbox, a request for a permit I never heard of, then a certified letter with a fine. We're only protecting property values, Margot would say at meetings, like a mantra, but protection has a price when you're collecting invoices from a consulting company no one can find. It escalated slow enough that you don't notice the slope until you're already rolling down it. Somebody took a chainsaw to an old oak on my boundary and left it in pieces, then billed me for hazardous tree removal for $1,200. Someone vandalized my boathouse, spray paint, and broken windows, and the HOA sent me a bill for debris removal. The one that woke me up was the water contamination report. They brought in a lab with a name I'd never heard, and suddenly my lake was a biological hazard. Boats were blocked, neighbors were called in for inspections, and the county inspector, a man with a clipboard and eyes that never left his watch, told me not to touch my shoreline until they cleared it. I remember standing by the dock, watching my reflection ripple in the morning light, thinking, since when did my coffee mug come with an environmental score? People act mean for simpler reasons than you'd think. In Pinebridge, it was a cocktail of jealous neighbors, developers with itchy hands, and a board that mixed power with secrecy. Margot had allies, a contractor named Greg who liked big machines and bigger invoices, and a guy called Aaron who handled compliance. I started to notice patterns. The same names on paid invoices, shell companies that appeared and vanished, a forged survey sheet slipped into county records that suddenly made someone else's property line prettier. When I asked questions at the next HOA meeting, Margot smiled and said, Eli, this community has rules. I told her rules don't include extortion. She laughed, like someone else's joke. My fight didn't start with a law book. It started with a stack of documents and a stubborn friend named June. June's a retired paralegal who moved here to volunteer at the library and garden, and she hates crooked people the way some people hate spiders, with an unreasoning, relentless dislike. She went through old county records like a dog digging for a bone and found something odd. A federal land patent from 1891, stamped and signed, that listed the waterway around Crane Hollow as an easement linked to public navigation. In plain English, the lake belonged, in part, to something bigger than the HOA. It wasn't a magic bullet, but it was a chink in the armor. We started to gather things. Harold, a neighbor who did numbers for a living, pulled bank records and found transfers to unnamed accounts timed with Margot's big decisions. Janet, who ran the pottery studio and had a camera on her porch, gave us night footage of a truck backing up to the dock at 2 a.m. Tom, a dock builder with a tattoo of an anchor, kept a careful log of the machines that came and went. We spent nights in my garage over cardboard boxes of copies, tasting burnt coffee and hope. There are two kinds of fear, the fear that makes you hide and the fear that makes you move. At some point we chose to move. We filed complaints, hired a real environmental scientist who ran independent tests showing the water was fine, pushed for transparency in HOA finances, and then the hardest part, we went public. The morning we called Channel 5, I felt like I was choosing between a trapdoor and a spotlight. We chose the spotlight because secrecy was the thing that killed neighbors slowly, quietly. Margot didn't take that well. She showed up at my property the day after the story ran, like she owned the sunrise, and said, "You're stirring trouble." I said, "I'm stirring truth." She leaned forward, the smile gone, and in a voice low enough for only me, said, "You can't play hero, Eli. Some things are settled, and you don't want a community unsettled." Then she turned to the camera people and acted like she'd been wronged. It was theater, but the set had real consequences. The county issued an injunction to block our access to certain sections of the shoreline while they investigated. Then came the heavy equipment. One night, big tractors rolled in under a contractor's banner and started cutting a drainage channel. They said it was safety work. We had footage. Tom's log had times. Janet's camera had license plates. We posted everything online, but the internet doesn't stop a bulldozer. The machine chewed at the bank like teeth. The water level dropped a foot overnight, and my dock listed to the side, like a tired old man leaning on one hip. That's when the phone call started. Anonymous threats, a smashed mailbox, someone shoving a brick through my kitchen window. Once, my truck tires were slashed, and the note left under the windshield wiper said, "Back off." The police took a report, polite but distant, because the line between civil dispute and criminal gets fuzzy when people in suits are involved. We felt isolated until the federal agents came, not because we were dramatic, because the 1891 patent mattered, and because a lake is harder to steal when the paperwork has a federal stamp. What happened next felt like a movie scene stitched from long nights. Court dates, subpoenas, a marshal's badge glinting across from the prosecution table. The forensic accountant laid out the paper trail. Invoices paid to ghost companies, deposits funneled through a middleman, bills padded, and bank transfers that lined more than one pocket. Margot swore on the stand, elegant, composed, that everything was above board. Then Harold produced a ledger with her signature and Greg's name on checks that paid for road improvements. That never happened. The judge looked tired and interested at once. The room smelled of stale air and justice. The climax was ugly and beautiful. Federal agents executed search warrants at the HOA office and at Greg's storage lot. They found equipment, false permits, and a stack of forged documents. Margot was arrested in her garden, pruning roses as if nothing would ever touch her. When they put the handcuffs on, she said one sentence to no one in particular: "You'll regret this." I didn't sleep that night, but I didn't feel afraid. I felt, for the first time since the oak fell, like we weren't alone. I won't pretend everything ended with a tidy bow. There were settlements, fines, and a reshuffling of the board. Years of messy lawsuits peeled away little by little. The community had to rebuild trust, and people healed at different speeds. Some neighbors moved away, tired of drama. Others stayed and put up new docks and new fences, but now we had a public ledger, quarterly audits, and an online portal where every invoice needed a receipt. The lake came back. We raised the water line where the bulldozer had cut it. We repaired the boathouse with Tom's steady hands, and the pottery studio reopened with a ribbon cutting that felt more like a campfire. We held a small festival one summer, with cheap burgers and a used boat on display that read, "Not for sale," in a way that made people laugh. I stood on that dock one evening, the sun like a coin sinking behind the trees, and realized how easy it is to forget that places are made of people. The land is only soil and water until someone decides to defend it. There's a part of this story that doesn't sit right with me, though, and I want you to think about it. Margot said she was protecting values, and some of the older members really believed it. They felt safer with rules even when those rules bent. Power rarely arrives announced as villainy. It dresses up as order and smiles in polished shoes. I don't say that to make enemies. I say it because community is complicated. People who do harm sometimes think they're doing good, and people who do right sometimes don't notice the harm they ignore. So here's where I'll leave you. An old man on a dock, a lake that belongs to everyone who cares for it, and a question that's simple and ugly at the same time. When your neighbor is wrong, how loudly do you speak up? If they're in the majority, do you stay quiet? If they're in power, do you still speak? Tell me what you think. Tell me if I should have handled it differently. Tell me where the line is between protecting a community and protecting yourself. And tell me if you've ever been in a fight that felt bigger than your life. If this story hit you, if it made your jaw tighten or your blood warm, drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, and share your own story of a neighborhood that turned on itself. If you want more like this, hit subscribe and tell your friends. The lake is calm tonight, but the issues we face in small towns and subdivisions, greed, secrecy, the slippery slope from rules to abuse, are everywhere. Talk about it. Argue about it. Don't let it slide.